What's happening, people? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Player in Focus video. And we have to talk about the boy, Miles Lewis-Skelly. We have to talk about him, right? I mean, there's a number of players that we could have talked about. And keep in mind, we're doing this video off the back of Arsenal's 3-0 victory at the Emirates over Fulham yesterday. So about 24 hours or so after the game, there's a number of players we could have probably talked about, right? You could have talked about Gyökeres, Saka, Calafiori, the center backs, Eze, Trossard, a number of players deserve some credit and some plaudits. And yesterday, Victor Gyökeres was my man of the match. We scored 3 goals. He got 2 goals, 1 assist. How could he not be man of the match? However, Miles Lewis-Skelly needs his own individual flowers and accolades, ladies and gentlemen. And it's the fact that we have to talk about how this man is starting in midfield for the first time in the Premier League under Mikel Arteta in senior men's first team football. Crazy. First time. What, 35 game weeks in the Premier League? All these Champions League games, Cup games. This is Miles Lewis-Skelly's first time since he's been in the senior team in the first team playing in midfield in his actual natural position. And what a display he put on. And we knew he was a midfielder by trade growing up in the academy all this time. And Arteta just decided not to use him in midfield for whatever reason, right? Um, I'm paraphrasing, but I believe after the game in Arteta's post-match press conference, he was asked why, he hasn't been played in midfield earlier. And Arteta actually did sort of say he almost pretty much said, again, I'm paraphrasing, but he almost pretty much said, I don't know why I haven't used him earlier. Maybe that's he admitted maybe that's something he'd have to look into on his part, maybe an error on his part, but he's not he couldn't even really answer the question as to why Lewis Skelly hasn't been playing in midfield earlier and why this is only our first time seeing him now in midfield in May, right? Since he's not just this season, but last season, right? Since he's broken in through the first team. We've not seen him play in midfield in a meaningful game of men's first team football, which is crazy, right? Like I said, you look at him, he's been playing a left back, right? This inverted left back style that Arteta traditionally has liked to play. Um, and you look at him, right? And obviously you can see why and how he's a brilliant midfielder growing up in the academy, right? We can see that all this time. And, he was playing as a midfielder coming through under the likes of Jack Wilshere, right? Where he really excelled coming through in Jack Wilshere when one of Jack Wilshere's last years as a coach in the youth setup. And just to run you through a couple of things here, actually, let me pull up the statistics and the facts as we like to do. So Miles Lewis-Skelly. So this is Miles Lewis-Skelly while he was in the academy. So Miles Lewis-Skelly worked under several key coaches during his development at the Arsenal Academy, most notably Jack Wilshere, who managed him at the U18 level, and Adam Birchall, who coached him through the younger age groups. He was also overseen by Academy manager Per Mertesacker, which we know about. Jack Wilshere coached Lewis-Skelly in the U18s, particularly during the successful 22-23 FA Cup run, and praised his development. So again, we've seen him, right? Jack Wilshere speaks high praise of Miles Lewis-Skelly. I'm sure he would have looked at Miles Lewis-Skelly and saw a player in himself, right? The similar mold to Jack Wilshere, somebody who's got that low center of gravity, strength, doesn't get knocked off the ball easily, can drive with the ball through midfield and evade 3-4 challenges. Got an eye for a pass. Confident lad, confident young lad, right? So I'm sure Jack would have seen that and seen a lot of similar traits of himself in Miles Lewis-Skelly. And like I said, Miles Lewis-Skelly really excelled and broke through, particularly in that 2022-23 campaign under Jack Wilshere's leadership and coaching and stewardship. So, yeah, we would have looked at that and said, okay, we have a bright young player coming through, a bright young midfielder coming through, and surely you'd think, him breaking through as a midfielder would, his ideal goal would be to come into the first team and play in midfield, right? Just common sense, logical, right? But we tend to do these things nowadays as the modern game. I spoke to one of my boys about this yesterday. Just what we do with the modern game nowadays, and we try to overcomplicate things and overcomplicate positions now, and in a day and age where the systems are so, fine-tuned and left backs have to be inverted and goalkeepers need to be able to play with the ball at their feet and strikers need to be able to drop deep. Like, what's wrong with just putting a midfielder in midfield, Like we're putting square pegs in round holes sometimes to be extra cute and extra clever. That only really works, you know, with certain managers, right? The elite top level experienced managers, Pep Guardiola's, right? Only Pep Guardiola can put a Fabian Delph in at left back and still win the league, or put a Bernardo Silva in at left back, or look what he's doing obviously now with Nico O'Reilly, right? Nico O'Reilly is a young lad who's come through in midfield, um, as a midfielder, but he's playing left back, and Pep is just in a different stratosphere altogether, right? Because he's the cream of the crop in terms of management, in terms of coaching. Like he's probably the GOAT, most would say, along with Sir Alex Ferguson, greatest of all time in management, in modern day management at least. So he can do those sort of things and get away with it. But bringing it back to an Arsenal standpoint, I mean, we got a good young coach in Arteta who, funny enough, is in the mold or trying to be of the mold of a Pep Guardiola. Um, and so obviously we do similar things here at Arsenal. We play with inverted fullbacks at times, or bring our center backs higher up the pitch, or play with a sort of false nine who can link up, which is something Pep has won the league doing. Playing without an out and out number nine, and this is right before Erling Haaland came in, obviously. Um, just the different tactical tweaks and stuff. But again, I think sometimes we don't want to overcomplicate the game, and again, you're putting a young guy. Also, what Miles Lewis-Skelly, his breakthrough season in the first team was 24, 25 seasons, the last season. And 18, 19 years old. I remember him coming on at the Etihad. That might be his first Premier League appearance when he came on at the Etihad off the bench. And you look at a guy who looked very confident, belief in himself. He was already scoring up with guys like Erling Haaland. So he'll go out there and do a job, and that just goes to show how good of a player Miles Lewis-Skelly is. Because whilst we've seen now, fast forward to 2026, almost two full seasons later. Yeah, we know that, Mazu Skelly, he's not a left back. That's not where his long-term future should be. He has the defensive limitations. Um, a guy like that, you want him to just play in midfield properly, right? You don't want him to start at left back and then invert into midfield and get caught out defensively. He's young, he's still learning his trade, right? And again, good on him because he's done more than a good enough job, Lewis Skelly, at left back since he's come into the team. He's played at the San Siro, he's played against Real Madrid, you know, Atletico Madrid. So he's PSG as well, I should add, in the semifinals of the Champions League last year. So Miles Lewis-Skelly has more than proved his worth as a capable left back. However, we do now have the luxury of a Calafiori, of a Hincapié, which has obviously seen Miles Lewis-Skelly's minutes reduced, and he's had a tough campaign as a result. Tough campaign for him. You would think that off the back of last season, just signed a new contract. He was linked with big clubs in the summer last year. I think Real Madrid apparently was looking at him, but we signed him on a new contract, and he's coming into a new season. And you would think off the back of playing in the Champions League semifinal and quarterfinal last year, and the back end of the Premier League, that he's going to come in and play heavy minutes again this season. And it hasn't quite worked out for him that way. Still a young lad, still a teenager, like I said. He could be around 19 or 20 years old now. If I'm not mistaken, maybe even 19. But the bottom line is he's still a young lad coming through, right? So he broke through into the first team earlier than maybe his trajectory should have and would have taken him. And then he had a bit of a humbling this year by not playing as much football in the first team. Mind you, you're as a teenager essentially competing against the team who's in a title race, competing against the team who was fighting on all fronts at one point in the season, on all four competitions, fighting to get minutes in a team who's, going down to the wire in the Champions League. So not easy. So again, kudos to him. But yeah, he would have had a humbling experience this year, playing off the bench most of the time and not playing significant minutes in the Premier League, certainly. Which would be tough for him because he backs himself, he believes in himself. Like I said, he's a confident young lad. And yeah, you're thinking this boy deserves to be playing more, and you kind of feel for him. He's one of our own, so as fans, naturally, we're going to feel for him. We're going to feel a little bit sorry for him and be saying, why is this kid not playing more? Um, but yeah, so it's been tough for him. But the way he, finally, like I said, match week 35, he's come in, and he's finally taken his chance, yesterday, and Arteta finally decided to play him in midfield. And good on the manager, right? Too little, too late, is it? In terms of saving his career at Arsenal, I'm gonna say no because he hasn't played much this season. There's been rumors that he's been maybe he might look for a move away, or other clubs might come in for him, which might tempt him to get more first team football. We saw him linked with there's rumors about links with a move to Man United, which hell no, absolutely not. Don't you, Arsenal Football Club, dare think about selling him to Man United or anybody for that matter. After off the back of yesterday's performance, he's shown that he needs to stay in this team, and fight in the Arsenal first team, and we need to keep him at our club. He's an Arsenal boy through and through. He loves the club. You saw the celebrations yesterday. You saw, how he felt at full time. The embrace with the manager, the embrace with the fans. He's Arsenal through and through. Don't make this guy leave and go somewhere else in the Premier League or anywhere else for that matter. keep him at our club. He's a young, brilliant talent, right? And he's useful in our squad. He is absolutely useful in our squad, right? The frustrations more so come with also the fact that Zubimendi and Rice have been run into the ground all season long. All season long, they've been overplayed, Zubimendi and Rice. And in recent months and weeks, they've shown their fatigue levels, right? Their levels, performance-wise, Declan Rice and Zubimendi have dropped off. Why? Because again, the manager has overplayed them and mismanaged them, in my opinion, and mismanaged their minutes. They're playing way too much football. There's barely been any rotation for the likes of Zubimendi and Rice. You bought in a Norgard who, you know, obviously he was brought in as a backup, but that was your player that you invested in. So why not play more minutes? There's games certainly where Norgard could have come in. He could have even come in yesterday, right? When you're with games that you're winning, especially in the first half of the campaign, when you're winning 2-3 nil at home or whatever, and there's 10, 15 minutes left. Bring off a Rice, bring off a Zubimendi, and give Norgard the minutes. Get other players involved. Bring Miles Lewis-Skelly in. There's times where, just last weekend, I believe it was against Newcastle, Zubimendi apparently, he was ill going into the game, or he came off at halftime in that game against Newcastle, and he was throwing up apparently because he wasn't well. Why are we shoehorning and forcing these players into the team when they're clearly in the red zone? Declan Rice went away to the England camp in the international break in March, came back because Tuchel and the coaching staff assessed him and said, "This guy's in the red zone. This guy shouldn't be. He's been playing way too much football." They were baffled by how much football he's been played when they did the medical assessment on him and his fitness levels and seeing that he's in the red. So again, it's something that Arteta still needs to learn to work on as a manager is, you know, getting the players minutes and loading their minutes properly and not overworking them, not overusing them. We've seen it with Saka, we've seen it with Ben White. We've seen it with Kai Havertz, not overusing these players and overworking them to the point where, they're risking long-term injury, muscular injuries, right? That's the risk that we run overplaying as Zubimendi and Rice. And now when we need them down the stretch, you know, energy levels have looked a lot lower than where they should be. And then there you go, in steps Miles Lewis-Skelly, right? And if we had used this boy, especially the way he performed yesterday, if we had used this boy in midfield a lot earlier this season, then you're looking at more manageable rotation minutes for the rest of our midfield players. Yes, we also know Marino's injured, by the way. We should add that in there. But as a manager, you got to look for solutions, right? And there was a solution staring you in the face in Miles Lewis-Skelly all this time, and we opted not to do it, which is a shame. And I hope it's not too little too late in terms of saving his career, Lewis Skelly. I hope he's still locked in here with us and wants to stay and not too dejected. Um, we're almost at the end of the season, the last month of the season now, and yeah, he needs to know that his future is still here, and his future is here in midfield. Forget this left back experiment. I don't want to see it anymore unless it's needs must, because he is a versatile player. He has shown his versatility. Unless it's absolutely dire needs must, we're forced into that situation, of course. But Miles Lewis Skelly's long-term future should be in midfield, especially because here's also why selling him makes no sense, right? We saw him play yesterday in that midfield role and boss the game, probably second man of the match behind Victor Gyökeres for his all-around performance. So we saw him boss a game in midfield where he should be playing. If you go and now sell him, right? Because again, I understand this summer that apparently we need to, there may be some sacrificial lambs in order for us to bring in other players and invest in other players. We're gonna have to sell some players in the summer. Okay, well, Miles Lewis-Skelly should not be one, first of all, and second of all, if you choose to you know forget. Let's take this one step aside for a second. So we selling him is out of the equation, in my opinion. But he was the forgotten man for the longest time, Lewis Skelly, as far as midfield is concerned. So that being said, we were always under the impression that we're going to go into the summer needing another midfielder, right? Because we've established and assessed that okay, Norgard didn't work out. He's probably going to be moved on. Arteta clearly doesn't trust him. He's going to have to be moved on, Christian Norgard. Therefore, we're going to need more midfield depth, right? And the talks were a more younger profile midfield player, somebody who can come in and rotate with the likes of Rice and Zubimendi and give them much needed rest and share the minutes, but also a young understudy, right? Because the last couple of years we've had like a Jorginho or obviously a Norgard, older experience heads, but we're gonna need more, maybe younger profile midfield players coming in and coming through the ranks and that we can invest in long term. Like I said, maybe to help and play alongside Zubimendi and Rice next season, because Zubimendi and Rice next season cannot do what they did this season, which is play 99.9% of the games. They're up there, both of them, for top three, top four, top five most minutes in all competitions of our players used this season is Zubimendi and Rice, and in midfield and in the Premier League, such a demanding position already as it is. That's way too much. They cannot go into next season doing that again without being rotated properly. They're both players who are going to be playing in the World Cup, so we cannot do that again. The fatigue is it's going to be way too much. We're risking injury with these players. So we were likely going to go into this summer looking for a midfielder, right? Why would you go and sell Lewis-Skelly if that's one of your sacrificial lambs to invest in other areas? You definitely know for sure that you pretty much need a midfielder to rotate next season. You have a midfielder in your ranks. We've now figured that out, right? Somehow we figured out Miles Lewis-Skelly, wow, shock horror, is a midfielder, can play in midfield. That is your long-term young midfield investment, that you don't have to spend any money on, that came through the academy. He's in your ranks, put those funds elsewhere, right? You don't need to go and look for another midfielder, another young midfielder, another midfield profile when you have one in your ranks who's been playing left back all this time, who's 19 years old, um, and showed us yesterday, hey, I'm here. Don't forget about me. I'm still that. I can be that midfielder that you're looking for to play in rotation or ahead of the likes of a Zubimendi, especially, right? So, yeah, save your money, Arsenal Football Club, Arteta. Don't look too far beyond what you already have. Look internally first. Look in your home first before you start shopping in the sale rack in other markets. We've got a guy here named Miles Lewis-Skelly who can and most definitely will be more than good enough to do the business, right? So, yeah, no sense in buying a midfielder when you have someone already. It doesn't make any sense. It's like me going in, I have a pair of Jordan 1s and I want to go buy another pair of Jordan 1s when, specifically speaking, right? If I want a pair of red Jordan 1s and I say, "Oh, this is nice. This is, my shiny new toy. I got this for Christmas last year, but oh, I still want another pair of red, Jordan 1s. Let me go buy another pair even though I have a pair at home." Like what sense does that make? I just got a pair of red Jordan 1s for Christmas, but I still want to go buy more red Jordan 1s. Like save my money. I've got it at home. What am I looking elsewhere for? Maybe that was a bad analogy, folks. I don't know if you guys catch my drift there, but it made sense in my head anyways. Um yeah, but again, I'm just so happy and pleased for Miles Lewis-Skelly. Like I said, one of our own. And looking at his game yesterday, I mean, game by the numbers, 97% pass accuracy, 7 duels won, 6 possessions won, 4 fouls won, 4 final third entries, 2 tackles, 1 chance created, 0 fouls conceded. And like I said, when you talk about the profile of a midfielder, especially in this Arsenal team, right, we've traditionally played with the one number six, and your left eight and right eight. Now, Miles Lewis-Skelly can play in a six and an eight because let's go over his youth development profile for a second. So obviously, we know Miles Lewis-Skelly predominantly played as a central or defensive midfielder throughout his time at Arsenal Youth Academy. Known for his ball carrying ability, he was a key figure in the heart of the midfield during the 22-23 season, as we discussed, in the U18 Premier League FA Cup run under Jack Wilshere. Primary position, central midfield, number six or number eight. So he came in hail end as a midfielder, often driving forward with the ball, earning him a reputation as a dominant midfielder in his age group. And we obviously know about his versatility as well. So even in midfield roles itself, I mean, he has versatility in the sense that he can play at number six, which you can understand and you can see that. And he can also play number eight. He can play number six because he's very comfortable in possession, so he can receive the ball off the center backs, receive it on the half turn, um, receive the ball under pressure, resist very press resistant, reminds me of a Thomas Partey in that mold, Miles Skelly with his comfortability on the ball. He can receive the ball from the center back with his back to or facing his own goal with his back to the opposition goal with 2 guys on him. Um, Turn them, drop a shoulder, right? Just turn them with pure strength and core strength. His body strength is brilliant, is next level for his age. So, as a number six, receiving the ball in a deeper position and being press resistant is crucial in Arteta's system, and he can do that. He can more than do that. As a number eight, he is tailor-made for that left eight role, right? The last left-footed left eight midfielder that we had that succeeded in this team was Granit Xhaka. Let's be honest, we have not managed to replace Granit Xhaka, and that was almost what 3 years ago now. He used to play that left eight role alongside Thomas Partey in the six really well. Granit Xhaka, just getting up and down that left side, whipping balls in from sometimes, an overlapping position. Granit Xhaka would get forward, and that was when Martinelli was having his best season on the left. Many times we've seen Xhaka get the ball out wide, or play it from a central midfield position out wide, get the ball out wide quickly to Martinelli, and sometimes even get on the overlap to Martinelli. Um, get on the overlap, the ball would come back to Xhaka, and he would just whip those balls into the box on his left foot. Declan Rice tries to do that, obviously, but he's not naturally left-footed. So even if he does, play the ball out wide to our left winger and then get on the overlap, his in-footed, in-swinging left-footed crosses are not going to be the same because Declan Rice is naturally right-footed. So he's naturally always going to want to come back inside. Um, However, Miles Lewis-Skelly, again, a naturally left-footed player, we can start going back to, it's just so many different options we can do with playing him there, right? We can go back to that 22-23 season, um, and play in a left eight role similar to what Xhaka played, right? Where Miles Lewis-Skelly, receives the ball in midfield, plays it out wide naturally because he's a left-footed player, so the balance of his body position, his weight is going to shift to playing it on the left side. So plays the ball out wide to our left midfielder, let's say, receives the ball, left winger receives the ball. Miles Lewis-Skelly can then get on the overlap and get the ball back and then whip the ball in with his left foot into the box. Right? You know what I mean? So Miles Lewis-Skelly from a left-footed left A position can get into underlapping positions. He can get into overlapping positions and whip the ball in on his left foot. So that gives us even better balance. He would also be used to that having played left back for a good amount of time in the first team. So getting him on the overlap, getting on the underlap, running him beyond, our left winger, for example, just to get some, different type of deliveries and balls into the box. Um, and then obviously from, just central positions as a left eight midfielder, again, getting on the ball. He's one of the few in this team who can drive through midfield with the ball. Obviously, as they can do it, Rice can do it to a level as well. But Miles Skelly just does it in such a different, more elegant way where you just trust him with the ball at his feet. Again, the strength to hold off midfielder to hold off players. We saw him do it against Atletico Madrid. Heck, we saw him do it yesterday against Fulham. He did it in the second half where he just received the ball, looked like he was under pressure, and drove through the middle of midfield through, a couple of Fulham players. But famously, earlier this season, he did it against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, where he received the ball, held off a few guys, drove right through midfield, I think, and then played the ball out wide to Martinelli, who scored. So he got an assist off of that. Did Miles Lewis-Skelly. That was one of his individual highlights of the season. But it's just, yeah, that comfortability of just being able to get forward. Yes, he can play in a deeper midfield role, but he can also get forward as well because he just has this ability, similar to a Jack Wilshere, to just be able to drive through the heart of midfield and still keep hold of the ball and secure the ball. Forward thinking, running with the ball. He's not necessarily fast, but it's the way he glides across the ground with the ball, evades challenges, keeps the ball close to him, and he can pick a pass as we've seen many times as well this season, last season. He's got an eye for a pass. He can play the ball through the lines. Um, and again, famously, we saw the goal against Man City last season, where he did the Erling Haaland celebration, right? If you guys remember, um, when I think he cut in on his right foot, scored on his right foot when he drove into the box. And this is again essentially playing an inverted left back position, but he drove into the box against Man City at home last season, beat a couple players and hit the ball on his right foot and into the back of the net. So this is a player, he's just tailor-made for midfield, um, just with all the attributes he has, the strength, the vision, the IQ, the movement, the intelligence, the close control, right? Like I said, eye for a pass. It's just everything that comes with it, press resistance. In this team, in Arteta's system, he's just tailor-made for that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like you would think you look at a player of his profile and then those are the kind of guys that Arteta likes. Why not use him more in midfield? And I think there's only one other time he could have played in midfield this season. I think it was in the FA Cup against Wigan at home, if I'm not mistaken. And he started on paper, right? He was in the team sheet in midfield, but I think an injury, I think it was to Calafiori, meant that Calafiori had to be pulled out of the starting 11. So before kickoff, Miles Lewis-Skelly had to come in at left back because Calafiori has had to come out, and I think Saka also came into the team. So there's some shifting parts at that time as to why Skelly had to move into left back due to a forced injury before kickoff of that game, which is a shame because we would have seen him. We would have got another sample size of seeing Lewis-Skelly in midfield, and that would have been in the FA Cup game a few months ago against Wigan. But that wasn't to be. So, again, kudos to Lewis-Skelly. He said it after the game yesterday against Fulham. I think he was interviewed and he said he had to rub his eyes when he looked at the team sheet and saw himself in midfield because he didn't expect to play, much less play in midfield. So not knowing that you're going to play, um, but then when in the last hour, looking at the team sheet and seeing yourself there and seeing your name there, you have to mentally switch on and prepare yourself to play. And again, if he was going to play, he would have. I'm sure Lewis-Skelly would have thought that he was going to play in left back. However, he's playing in midfield. So, you know, first time starting in midfield in the first team, not just, your average FA Cup game against the third division side. You're starting in midfield in the Premier League in a title race with 3 or 4 games left in the season. You know, how's that pressure for you? So big up to Miles Lewis-Skelly. Well done. He handled the pressure just like, we knew he would be able to. We knew he could come through it. He is the man. He's his confidence levels, his belief in himself backs himself. There was no doubt that he was going to come through and he was going to shine. And what an unbelievable performance. And it's something that we need to take note of going forward. Arteta cannot ignore this going forward anymore. The signs were there when he was in the youth team. He came through. We've now all seen his attributes and said, why is this guy not playing in midfield earlier? You know, so yeah, listen, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, Arteta has now a decision to make. We have the small matter of the Champions League semi-final second leg on Tuesday against Atletico Madrid, which I'm absolutely buzzing for. And yeah, Lewis-Skelly has put his name in the hat to say, "Hey, I'm here. You can't ignore me. You may even have to start me." I'm almost tempted to say, we can go into that one with an unchanged team against Atletico on Tuesday because the way we played yesterday at the Emirates against Fulham blew them apart. It was our best first half of football, of attacking football that we've seen all season, in my opinion. And there's no coincidence. You put Lewis-Skelly, more ball players, more ball handlers, forward-thinking players in there, guys who can, settle the team, control the tempo, dictate. That wasn't just down to Miles Lewis-Skelly. The likes of Eze, Trossard, Calafiori, Saka, all these guys who are, ball dominant, technically gifted and crafted players who can get on the ball, make things happen, have different inventions and innovative ideas on the field. Like these are all guys who, you know, contribute to why we were so fluid in attack yesterday and help get the best out of a Gyökeres, funny enough. So that's not a coincidence. I'd be tempted to say start with the same team on Tuesday, but we'll look more into that once we do another episode, another video looking at the game to come. And like I said, Miles Lewis-Skelly has definitely put his foot forward to say, "Hey, I'm still here. Don't ignore me. Um, Give me a case to start, not just, in this game coming up, but in the rest of the run-in, in all competitions that we're still fighting on." And he also, made it very clear that, hey, don't sell me. This summer is coming around soon, and you're talking about midfielders that we may need, this and that. Well, you got one in your ranks. Don't sell this kid, Miles Lewis-Skelly. He is the future in midfield for this club. He's tailor-made attributes wise, as I explained throughout this video, why he is suited to midfield for us. And when you look at the type of mold of midfielders that Arteta likes, give this guy a chance. Give him a chance before you'd potentially make one of the biggest mistakes we would have made in years by selling a young prospect, a young academy prospect, a midfielder with so much talent and ability. Give him his chance in his proper position. Don't do what we did with Zinchenko, right? We know that guy was not a left back either. Give him his chance in midfield, Miles Lewis-Skelly. This is one of our own. This is, Hale Ender, 49-49, Lewis-Skelly. So big up to Lewis-Skelly. Well done. Brilliant performance. So happy for him. And yeah, hopefully he gets another start potentially on Tuesday, but we'll see what the manager does. Ladies and gentlemen, please, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the video, I don't think, but make sure to like and subscribe. We're growing, we're growing rapidly actually, and we're on all platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Spotify, we're on TikTok, and obviously YouTube. And YouTube is obviously where our bread and butter at the moment, where we're really, you know, putting all our efforts forward. And like I said, just growing rapidly. So yeah, more videos to come. More episodes and more content coming out with the rest of the boys, Laurent and Murdad. We're going to be putting out another episode. I believe it's episode 104, coming out within the next 24 hours or so. And yeah, just more to come as we wind down in this Premier League and Champions League campaign. As an Arsenal fan, still a lot to fight for and a lot to play for. So come on, you Gunners. I've been CJ from the Gunners Corner, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time, folks. Take care. Love and peace.